Hi, Elena. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It's been forever.
It has. And
Yeah.
as I was preparing for our conversation today, I was thinking about how we first crossed paths, and it was through the Anusara yoga community. I think it was about 20 years ago. I think I was definitely in my late
There.
20s, which would have been 20 years ago. And I remember going to a class at Vera Yoga
Mhm.
was it in Soho?
It was on
Yeah,
on Broadway between Prince and Houston.
that's right. And I think I had also interviewed you I used to write for Yoga Journal. And I think I'd also maybe done some interviews
That's right.
for Yoga Journal. Maybe that was how we first met. And then I went to a class at
hmm
Vera
hmm
Yoga. So we've changed a lot since then. I know I've changed a lot. I know you have changed a lot. The world has changed a lot. And it seems from the outside that there was a particular period of time. And I know things on the outside always look different than they actually are, when you're the one experiencing it. But from my recollection, it seemed like you went through a period of time where there were a lot of big changes happening, and which included leaving Vera Yoga, closing down Vera Yoga, becoming sober, getting starting on your sobriety journey, and the sudden death of your mother, and then eventually a move to where you are now in Santa Fe, which is a very different world than New York City.
Yes.
So, can you take us back to that? Am I right that saying that all those were kind of happening around the same time?
We closed Vera Yoga. My business partner and I, Lynn, closed Vera Yoga in 2014, I want to say. And then, yeah, that would have been 12 years exactly. It was 2014. I lost my mom in 2016. The same year, I was asked to make that journal called Practice You, which is now like a zillions bestseller. Amazing. So I feel a lot of my mom leaving and then this force for understanding and insight around that time. The move to Santa Fe happened in 2020, so 4 years later. Very much at the start of COVID, very much thinking we were just coming for a month and then ended up making this our home. So yeah, that was a period of, six years, and really it's been the last 10 years since that change started. And I am so grateful to report that nothing and everything has changed.
So let's start with that first shift with
Mm.
you and your business partner at the time closing Vera Yoga. I imagine that was a hard decision to come to. What was that like for you? Because that was your central offering at that time. Is that
hmm
right? Yeah.
Yeah, I was open for 12 years. And, there's a special quality of something that started when a movement started. New York really just started welcoming yoga large, but in a large scale around that time, 2002. It's right after 9/11. We all needed healing, really. And Lynn and I proceeded to carry that studio for 12 years. We had so many wonderful teachers, visiting teachers, a few trainings. But the month that we closed it, we learned that the rent was going up from like $10,000 a month, which was already quite a stretch, to 13. And we both sort of looked at each other and we said, that's a sign, and that's the end. And it was not hard insofar as it was very obvious that it needed to happen financially. The hard part was, having the maturity to say, okay, it's time to move on. We could not possibly continue to support all the teachers. And that was hard, really hard, actually. Um, the easy part was moving on really uncomfortably, sort of shedding that whole skin and beginning to feel who else I was without that. And so many things have happened since then, different businesses, now virtual coursework, books, poetry has happened. And now Buddhist chaplaincy is happening for the next 2 years. And I've never felt more at home in my body, in my life.
Was it because I know myself when I made financial, not when I made professional transitions, there's financial uncertainty that's inherent in that, and that can be scary. It was like, was that scary to make that transition before kind of you landed in the new thing?
I had already started what ended up being my next sort of big, uh, let's say, business. I had already started. And so that business kind of took center stage as I went and traveled around the world and taught yoga. I was also growing a business with doTERRA, and the oils had been a part of my life already for a decade. Now it's been 2 decades. And I grew very, very quietly and slowly with friends from all over the world. And now we have this small but mighty family of people in Norway, in the UK, all over Europe, US, big representation in Canada. And that business has been a savior for me, straight up. Um, Insofar as it let me leave the studio and then move a lot of my energy toward that and create a level of financial stability that I hadn't had before, particularly as I was raising Jonah, my son, on my own. And that was, his dad and I got divorced when he was 3, and then closed the studio when he was 8. And so I really am grateful for that experience with doTERRA. It's still ongoing, for the support and also for um, the feeling of efficiency and connectedness that I have all over the world.
It sounds like that was like your bridge from your old life into what, the early stages of what has become your new life. And so then you were doing doTERRA, building that business, traveling and teaching yoga around the world. And then you started your Practice You book.
Mhm.
And what led you into that?
My publisher actually called and said, I would really like for you to create a journal. There's a dearth of really beautiful journals, and I want you to make the watercolor paintings. Go, basically. And uh, as soon as my mom passed, I started painting every morning at 5 a.m. I would do a few pages, and it took about a year to get it all together. And by the end, it was really straight from my heart, just so close to the vest. Um, and my way of working through the ambiguity of her death. I've since been trained as a hospice volunteer and working with my best friend who's a death doula and being part of her course and learning from her and just learning in experience at hospice in a few different settings. I wish I would have known what I know now when my mother was passing, because I would never have done some of the things that we did. I would have stayed with her body. I would have anointed her, things that I didn't know how to do. But yeah, it was around that time, and it was a very special process, that art making. She would have really supported it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So what was that period like when your mom died? Because I remember that it was sudden.
You know, it was sudden, uh, in as much as she had been fine, clear of cancer for about 4 years or so. The last time I saw her, she came to my house. She sat down on the couch and she was clutching her left arm and like massaging it. And she said, "Oh, honey, will you massage my hand?" And she gives me her left hand. And I quickly go into the back and I whip up some coconut oil balm salve with some, essential oils in it. And I sit down on the floor. She's sitting on the couch and I grab her hand and I start massaging her hand. Then I move over to her feet like I used to do for her mother. And um, she was in heaven. And I remember her leaving that day. And her hair was quite long and straight, which it had never been before in my life. It was always very curly. And after she had chemo, it got straight. Um, she had bangs, so she was looking very sort of youthful, but her coloring was wrong, and I could feel intuitively in my body that something was awry. And I got a feeling she left. She went down the hall of my New York apartment, and I sort of was facing this way, going back into the house to do whatever I was doing. And I looked over my shoulder like this, and I was like, "I love you." And she looked back at me. I will never forget this. And she had like this impish look in her face, like, and I knew that was going to be the last time. I can't tell you why or that it made any sense. I know that I cried when I walked away, but after looking over my shoulder, and it was a matter of days, a week and a half, that I got the call from my sister telling me that she had had a heart attack in their house. My dad had done CPR. She was now in the hospital. They were trying their best to revive her, but there was no going and get in a train. And I proceeded to um, write a lot during that time. I wrote a lot of poetry during that time, and it was just so heavy, dense, deep energy. She died 2 days later, and I had some really special moments with her alone, even though she was comatose. I know she heard me. Several friends who are wonderful intuitives, very attuned, have reported since that they've had dreams where they've heard her say, "Hey, tell her I heard every word." You know, things like that that are undeniably true, that she is around. And I feel her sort of guiding me with my kid through certain windows and portals of difficulty and ambiguity. And I feel her guiding my choice to be a chaplain. She's around, and that makes it a lot easier.
And it sounds like your grief process, your healing process after that, a lot of that revolved around those early morning painting sessions.
Indeed. Yeah, that was in the, almost dark dawning of the morning. Um, and I would hear her. It was so, you know how it is if you are listening or watching and you have some connection with someone who's on the other side and you can sort of hear their voice, even though it's not their voice, but it is. It's your voice, but it's in their cadence and their words. Things that I would never think or say come to mind. And I know that it's her.
Were there other things in that grieving process that were really supportive for you?
Yeah, writing poetry was incredibly supportive. And I never thought I would publish it, but I ended up making a book called Softening Time. It's a whole collection of poems, and many of them are about her. And, it's an interesting look, a very personal look at grief and my own grief in particular. And, you know, people find it very comforting and they sort of I've been told that they sort of plug in their own names and experiences and details into the cadence of the poetry, and they find a lot of relief in the pieces, which is heartening.
And were you not writing poetry before that, or it just accelerated?
It accelerated. I was writing, and I've always been writing poetry since I was a little girl, since
Mhm.
I was like in seventh and eighth grade, and I was thinking, I just want to die. This is
Yeah.
just not working out. This life, this is so awful. There were so many weird things at school, and just discomforts that were profound for a 13, 14-year-old. And yeah, I've been writing all this time, and I just finally got the courage to put it together. I've been like sort of challenging, daring, threatening myself for the longest time. Like, you need to write, you need to get this book out. And I've had a pile of pages like this high for years, and I finally edited it in 2021 too, and added a bunch of pieces, edited. It finally came out last year in the spring.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sister. Thank you. Yeah.
And yoga,
Mm.
it seems that that was once a primary identity for you. It was for me. And now it's
Mm.
not. I mean, now like I practice with you on Yoga Glow. I love your color coordinated outfits. It's
Oh, bless
visually
you.
so beautiful to watch on the screen. So
Yeah.
yoga is still like a really central part of your life, but it's not, seems like it's not such a central identity anymore. Do you feel like that's true?
If we're discussing identity specifically, I like to think, and based on what you've just said, I'm so happy that you like practicing with me there on Glow. Every time I walk through an airport, it seems, or many different public places in many different weird far reaches of the world, someone comes running up to me thanking me for the Yoga Glow classes. And I'm always
Mm,
just amazed that it reaches that far. And the fact is, I've been on there for, 13 years or something. It's a long time. Hundreds upon hundreds of classes are on there of mine. And I love the work. If you can actually see behind me, there's my camera set up. And
yeah.
there's the notebook by my mat. And every morning I wake up and I do a few more little tweaks and ideas for upcoming classes that I'll record. And when I'm home, because I'm home less now than I used to be, um, I'm pretty much recording a class every morning. And I cannot tell you the joy that it brings me to still have this, uh, force, thrust of the practice of the asana practice in my life, and the challenge of creating classes that actually have emotional uh, intelligence and relevance to our lives. That's kind of what I love doing. And to have the constant practice of it is a real gift.
Mm. Yeah, I can feel how much you love it when
Yeah.
I'm taking those classes. You're
Yeah.
just fully there, fully in it, not going through the motions.
No, my body is, I can tell from now at 54, having a really regular practice still, which I don't know if I would if I wasn't doing this job, honestly. But I can tell you that my body loves it. So happy to be in a regular practice and so grateful. And even when I'm not in town and I'm not recording, I bring my Glow notebook with me and I do my own classes. And I can't tell you what a gift that is, um, to want to and to feel the benefit of it in my body, and particularly in my mind.
And at what stage in this process did your sobriety journey start?
That was in 2016. Hold on. No, that was 2014. Excuse me. October
Mhm.
21st of 2014. Because when my mom passed, I'd already been 2 years sober and she was really psyched about this. Um, a year and a half, technically. It was very obvious. It sort of landed on me and there was no turning back. It was from one day to the next, it's over and done. And everything went out the door, all of the paraphernalia, all of the little traces of, well, maybe if, maybe just gone. And I proceeded to take a 40-day proper sadhana with art and practice. I had no idea if it was going to work, honestly. But by the end of the 40 days, I was so clear on the fact that there was not that was not coming back into my life. And that sort of level of presence has never left me.
Mm. And so we're talking about marijuana. Is that right?
We are
Yeah.
marijuana and alcohol. Like
And
there was,
alcohol.
I never really liked alcohol. It wasn't my thing, but it was around. And when it was
Yeah.
around, I would
It was
drink.
part of the picture.
Totally. You know, so many people drink now. Many fewer in my life are drinkers. So many more people are getting a whiff of what it means to practice good self stewardship. So they're not having any of it. Particularly alcohol is so poisonous. But my main issue was marijuana, and it was the way that I um, numbed out what I didn't want to experience or feel, particularly when there were times of transition or my son and I weren't um, meeting eye to eye. That sort of suffering, I was not having that suffering. I was going to be numb for it, and it proved to be really difficult to manage in the end.
Did
And I
that
was
40-day
nervous.
sadhana, did that happen before or after you let go of your yoga?
That would have been just after, about 6 months later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which the timing of it made very much sense to me. That letting go of that whole studio identity and all of the responsibility that I had. And frankly, I wasn't that good at owning a studio. I did my best. My business partner handled all the finances. I was supposedly handling the sort of interaction with teachers and staff, and I wasn't very good at that. Um, I'm much better at managing people now than I was then. I was so concerned with what people thought of me, so narcissistic, so egotistical, a very different vibration overall that I can feel at times when certain songs come on or certain people ring up or memories arise, and I can feel that vibrational imprint and signature of that time. And it was just youth and ego. And I can see it so clearly now.
It just seems like you passed through a window of time there where there was a big reorganization of everything that laid the
Yeah.
foundation for everything that you're living now, which seems like it
Yes.
comes from a place and not like this wasn't there before, but I know we all go through this in our lives, especially in, I think the decade of the 40s can be a big time for this. If we're
Yeah.
on a conscious path of just really coming into deep alignment and deep wholeness and deep integrity with
Mhm.
yourself.
Yeah. There's a level. What are the two? Oh, yes. Two words that my teacher and one of her colleagues use often. They emphasize precision and gentleness. And when I started studying Zen in 2020 and I started looking at those two words really deeply, like, what does that mean? I saw the carelessness with which that egotistical young 30-something-year-old woman was operating. And I saw the harshness. And those two words, particularly together, it's Roshi Joan Halifax and her colleague, Sensei Kazuaki Tanahashi, who wrote so many of the seminal Zen books that we have at our fingertips today with such good fortune. This emphasis on precision and gentleness lends itself in every realm of life, from how we treat ourselves to how we treat each other, how we handle our work, how we handle our children, how we handle our partnerships, our parents at this stage in our lives in our 40s and 50s. Um, those two words together, really, upon hearing them like third, fourth, fifth time in certain teachings, one day just took my breath away. And I thought, oh my God, wept. just destructed. And that destruction is still going on, actually. Now, as I enter into chaplaincy and I see what kind of spiritual formation is really required to be a chaplain, more is
What are you
falling away.
noticing? What are you noticing you're needing to let go of and step into?
More refinement along these very same lines, less selfishness, less harshness, more precision, more gentleness, more care, even with like how I place my shoes, how I drink my water, how I wash the dishes, like all of these things now, everything just became lately very loud to me.
It sounds
And
like
it's,
it's really making your life your practice.
yeah, that's fair to say. Well said.
So for listeners who aren't familiar, what does it mean to be a Buddhist chaplain? And what does that training involve?
To answer the first question, I really don't know yet. I have some distant ideas. What it involves is 100 plus hours of volunteering, a giant final project that is of service in this community that is starting to take shape, about 10 written papers, glosses, and reflections, another 10 of those over 2 years. It's like an associate's degree. It's pretty intense. And what I can see from how it's beginning, particularly at Upaya Zen Center, is a sweeping shift toward uh, embodiment of the vows that we take as Zen practitioners, should we choose to receive the precepts. Um, really committing to freeing ourselves and others, really committing to being a place of groundedness for people who are suffering. Um, I'm thinking of the four vows right now. Creations are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to transform them. Reality is boundless. I vow to perceive it. The awakened way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. And living into those vows is the work. To be a chaplain, I think, somewhere in the realm of silent, steady, grounded comfort, no matter where, no matter what.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. We'll see how it unfolds. I am doing 3 different volunteer placements. One is in hospice, a couple of different scenarios with a 4-bed small hospice here in Santa Fe and also in home with families. I teach yoga at the men's level 2 penitentiary here. And it's one of my favorite hours of the week, honestly. I love it. I do it at least twice a month. Just such gentle men who have been really given the short end of the stick and did precisely what they could do with the ingredients they had in their lives and treating them with respect and kindness and humor and levity. We really have such a good time together. And the third is a training that I'll be taking this summer, actually, for facilitating grief work with children and their families, children who have lost a parent or sibling due to either illness or immigration complexity. These are really pretty serious situations, and I'm completely not trained. So I'm waiting to do the training in July, and then I'll start that work sort of toward the end of the year.
it sounds like this is a path of deeper service.
Mm, mm, yeah.
And did your call towards this come? I'll back up a little bit. So you went out to Santa Fe during the pandemic. A lot of people relocated during the pandemic. I did as well. And you thought you were just going to stay there for a stretch, just like a new pandemic location.
Yeah. We thought 1 month, maybe two. And then on day two that we were here, we drove by Upaya Zen Center, and I had met Roshi Joan about 20 years prior and had clocked her like, oh, wow, that that woman. But I was already so deep in the Anusara morass that I couldn't imagine. I had the studio, I had a whole thing. I couldn't imagine extricating myself or even fancy Buddhism at all. I thought it was dark, sort of stayed. How funny we are. And that day I saw Upaya Zen Center. I saw the sign. I was convinced that it couldn't be right because I thought Roshi was in Northern California for some reason, where all the other Zen centers are, Green Gulch and San Francisco. And I went online as soon as we finished the hike that we went on after that sighting and found out that all of the programming had gone online in the last 3 days and they were working it out on Zoom. And I proceeded to take dozens of programs since then. And as soon as I could be in attendance in the Zendo, boy, was I nervous. I went down there dressed in all, my black clothes, and boy, I fell right in to that place. And since I've taken a few month-long practice periods, I took the precepts, like I said, which is called Receiving Jukai from Roshi Joan last year, almost a year ago exactly, and have not looked back. This feels very much like my calling, and you can blame it on Roshi Joan. You can blame it on all of the teachers that teach at and with Upaya. But the fact is, the the emphasis on socially engaged Buddhism. Our teachers were both Thich Nhat Hanh and Roshi Bernie Glassman, who founded the Zen Peacemakers Order, and so many other just incredible initiatives of service. And all of that sort of mixed together inside of me in a way that just bubbled over. And I knew that this was my direction for the rest of my life.
That's profound. And so that the main thing that led you to move to Santa Fe to be so
No,
close?
that's the funny part. No, it was March 14th, and my friend's father, who worked in some way, was contracting or something with FEMA. He called my friend, and my friend called me and said, hey, double O dad reporting in to tell me that I have to get all of my friends out of New York as soon as possible because they're going to shut down the city. It's going to be very
Mhm.
hard to move around. And I was like, what? Shut down the city? What do you mean? She's like, no, no, you have to believe me and you have to go. So I looked on Airbnb and found like a house here in Santa Fe that looked cool. And my best friend had just moved here from LA. She was like, come here, you're going to like it here. And sure enough, it was like the minute we got off the plane, we took the JetBlue 8 p.m. flight straight to Albuquerque. I don't know if that one is still running. We land at like 10 or 11. The airport is empty, emptier than ever because it's middle of COVID and everything had just shut down. Everybody was masked and all kinds of crazy. And nobody was at the Albuquerque airport. The only sound one could hear, well, I wrote a piece on this for the Arrow Journal, was the wheelie carry-ons. Click, 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 because somehow whoever designed that airport designed it with tiles that are like bricks. It's the weirdest choice ever. And the three of us are listening to our bags, click, 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 clicking along. And we're just like, this place is awesome. Super like hokey and awesome. Get to the house, 2 days later, 3 days later, we're all like, we're never leaving here.
Mm.
The lady who rented us the house came over and she was like, do you want to go look at houses to buy? And we were like, well, sure. We have nothing else to do. Let's do that. And within a month, we were zoning in on actually this house. And at the time, people thought I was crazy. They were like, no, no, no. Wait till the prices go down. They're going to go down again. And I'm like, not in Santa Fe. And I'm so glad we did this. My child is now not a city kid, but a country kid with a camper and a camping habit and a skiing love, and is a mountaineer, is going to school in Colorado, which never would have happened had we stayed in New York. So it's a series of very fortuitous events for which I am so grateful, which I do not for one moment take for granted.
And it's also such an artist town.
It is. Yeah, it got me painting again. Practice You and Being You were the two books that I made while I was living in New York. And the pages are like this big, so I can't really do anything bigger. But here I can
Have big
create,
canvases.
yeah. I'm working on a really big one now for a dear friend that's about to go on the ground and get poured on. So it's very, I, like I said, I'm so thankful. I do not take this for granted. And I'm taking all of this peace that I feel, I'm gathering it all together and I'm creating a life of service because that's what I must do.
I also want to ask you about shaving your head, cutting all your hair off.
Yeah.
I think I first saw you on Instagram and I was like, wow. And it looks just so natural on you.
It would look
And
natural on you too, promise.
I did have a hair like that when I was in my early 20s. I loved it. I was studying
Yeah,
in West Africa and
right.
I'll do it again. I'll do it again at some point.
It's
What
amazing.
what led to you doing that? And
The Instagram that you saw was with my best friend who at the time had had a stage 3.5, 4 cancer diagnosis. And as soon as she got the diagnosis, she's actually the title piece in Softening Time. It's called Softening Time, the piece about her. She calls me up. I pull the car over, bereft and also feeling very purposeful. She tells me everything, all the details. It's looking really scary. And I hadn't studied or really come close to, what it means to be alive with my own death close by yet. And whoa, I just said, whatever happens, as soon as you shave your head, I'm going to shave mine. And she was like, really? You don't have to do that. I was like, no, 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 I'm going to do it. And came time, got the text. She was like, okay, it's all falling out. We're on treatment number 3 or 4, and it's time. And so we got on Instagram and just did it. At the time, Instagram was much more of a force than it is for me now. But um, boy, supporting her in that way felt so good. And she's fine now. She's been all clear for a couple of years. Just got another one, and it's such a gift to have her. She comes to visit. Brilliant.
and the identity shift from being someone who had long hair to had just shaved hair, was
Yeah.
that a process for you or did it just feel so right?
It was instant. I remember shaving it off and just going, oh my God, this looks amazing. This feels amazing. I'm done. I'm done. And yeah, maybe you could say that although I feel like the dropping of the identity happened some years prior, it was August of 2021. And I think it's fair to say that upon the release of all that hair, some other priorities emerged, and it was no longer about, and it has been no longer about like beauty, hair drying. oh, let's blow it out today. Should I go curly or straight? Like it's nothing. It's just put your clothes on, do what you have to do. And I put on, I think this would be one of my mother's favorite outfits, although I got it after she died. And I'm wearing it today because I'm leaving you and I'm going to this beautiful lady Marta's house who's in hospice. We're probably, well, like a month away or so from her transition. And I just go, she's very, very, very far along in cognitive impairment. So I just go and I sit and I sing. And sometimes I read to her and sometimes I sing. Sometimes I play music, and I like to wear light colors for her. But otherwise, I'm mostly wearing black these days.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. But that's it. There's no more beauty.
Yeah. Or at
Yeah,
least that the form that that old beauty took.
correct.
And I also want to
Correct.
present your age. You said 54. Are
54
you
this year in
are you
October.
in menopause now? Are you in perimenopause? Where are you in that process?
I am 2 years in, my sister.
Okay.
So nice. It feels so good. Um, I had a few symptoms around 47 or 48 years old and instantly was advised by my doctor, Gabrielle Lyon, to get to a gym, get a trainer, start lifting heavy shit, and start eating more protein, whatever form that would take. She didn't care. In her world, she prefers animal-based protein, but I go plant-based very often, mostly. And lately, I haven't actually had any animal protein in like, I don't know, 4 months. I'm going to do a blood test and see how that looks comparatively to the last time. I'm just not feeling animals right now. I just can't. Um, Menopause has been a breeze as a result of these good pieces of advice that I got to build muscle, to make sure I was getting adequate protein. All of this fed my brain. I could feel the shift almost instantly. She has me on a low dose of plant-based progesterone and a little estradiol patch on my abdomen. And that will be, if you're listening, I also have a whole menopause summit that I did that's totally free forever, where she's one of the guests. Sarah Gottfried is a guest. But we talk a lot about this. Um,
Yeah, I'll put the
the
link to that in
estradiol,
the show notes.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's good information because not enough people are really just having this conversation out in the open. They're all like behind a closed door with a doctor. The fact is, between the moment you stop getting your period and 5 years later, there's a window of time where you can actually supplement certain things like estradiol for estrogen, where instead of it tanking, you can sort of go, I have a super low dose and just sort of maintaining so that my bone density is protected and my heart is protected. My mother died of a heart attack, remember? So these are and also had a bone density issue. These two things are really of concern to me. Um, so
Are
yeah,
you
it's a
still
longer
doing the
conversation.
weightlifting now?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Look.
Yeah. Got your kettlebells and your
I got my kettlebells, I got my yoga chair, and I have the Wanda chair for Pilates, which I do.
great.
Yeah, it's nice I have to tell you, it's really nice to just take care of my body. It was so
Are there
long
other
in the making.
self-care practices that are really supporting you for your body?
Infrared sauna has been a big one for me, actually. A lot of walking outside in nature, that has been very important. Yoga Nidra, simple, no equipment required. Lie down, scan your body. I really love listening to Tracy Stanley on SoundCloud, though, and Octavia Rahim is also a really dear teacher to me of Yoga Nidra. Um, Sleep. Sleep is a form of self-care. We are in bed by 9 o'clock, usually with books, like actual books, which I have a lot of them, or we're watching old Japanese films. And we're on a tear for the last probably 6 months, going through all of Kurosawa, and now we're in an Ozu streak. this filmmaker Ozu just blows my mind. Um, yeah, and we actually just recently watched a really good Iranian film called Close Up that also blew my mind. But yeah, that's all part of sleep hygiene. Like watch something deep and slightly intellectual and really thought provoking. Talk about it a little while. Be asleep by 10, 9:30, out. So delicious. I don't have an alarm clock ever. I wake up at 5 or 6, happy, rested.
Is there a certain way that you like to start your day?
Yeah, I just roll right into sitting actually now. I have my Rakasu. I'm receiving the precepts. I sit, usually sit for about 25 to 40 minutes, depending on the day. Go record some glow if I'm home. Um, make a tea, sit for a little while. Sometimes I serve myself tea. I have a tea table right here that's right now being co-opted as a desk for the chaplaincy training that I just finished this last week. And then I start working, and I've gotten my inbox down to, instead of getting 150 emails a day, it's like 50. So that's good.
What was there anything that helped to minimize that, the flow, incoming emails?
Maybe a listener is interested. I will share that I've started to make filters for emails. So fellow Substack authors goes into a filter because I love supporting fellow authors on Substack. It is like one of my favorite things to do. So I take about a half hour to an hour every other day, and I go into that file. Everyone's posts are there. Everyone's likes or comments on my posts are there. And I just get really interactive, go through those emails, tend to them, respond to them, process them, delete them. Um, that's really helpful. Most of the emails that are coming in can go into a little bucket that I can check on my own time rather than responding as though, um, reactively to them. And when I open up my inbox, it's much more spacious because all of those things have already been filed away.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea. So
It's weirdly
you're not
efficient.
just seeing it and yeah, then being reactive and feeling like you need to respond right away.
Even the reaction that I noticed the reaction that I was having in my body, chemically, like every time it's like a whole conversation going on in my chemistry. And
Right.
I wasn't willing to go forward like that anymore. So now it's like on my own time, I'll choose to respond to that person, to those things. It's awesome.
And just a couple final questions. Your journey, you've been very public about your journey over these years. How has that been for you? Does that just feel natural to, as things are going on for you, to share them? Or has there ever been any times where you've not wanted to do that? Or how has that been for you?
It's always just been about the truth in whatever form it might take that might be of service to somebody else. And while it started in a pretty egotistical place and like wanting to be seen and heard and felt, and, I worked on that for a long time. And I realize now that the intimacy that I experience with myself through my sitting practice is actually the most service that I can offer. And so all the things that are true are still true. I don't mind people knowing them. I have nothing to hide. There's no, nothing unknown. And that's kind of a nice thing, it's just all out there. And I've made plenty of mistakes and tried to rectify them, failed miserably, continuously. And it is what it is. I know that I'm on my path and learning how to be a good human that is actually offering contributions in this world. And that is all that I can do. So the sort of difference or distinction between public and private is no longer really of interest to me. I have nothing to hide. I raised a great kid. I made a bunch of mistakes professionally. I do really good work now that I don't need to be seen for. Like, I love my practice. I'm really lucky with a beautiful, warm partner. And my dad is still alive. My sister's awesome. And I have wonderful friends. You know, I'm going to cook a nice meal tonight, some kitchery and some steamed veggies. That's kind of the extent of what's exciting around here, you know?
Yeah. I I relate to that. My path has been to share everything when, when the
Yeah,
time is right,
right.
but it feels liberating because really there's no skeletons in the closet. There's nothing to hide. I don't have any secrets from anyone.
No, it's a good feeling. It's a really good feeling, you know?
So for anyone listening who is going through a challenging time,
Mm.
whether that's perimenopause, menopause, financial challenge, career shift, death of a loved one, anything, what would you say to them?
There are two things. The first would be fundamentally, uh, the whole name of this game is impermanence. And so, whatever is challenging or just pressing on you right now, know that that's going to change. And know that we're all, without fail, changing, fluid, impermanent. I took a class, secondly, with Frank Ostaseski, who often teaches at Upaya, who's becoming a dear friend and mentor of a sort to me. He's the author of a book called The Five Invitations, which I strongly recommend to all humans on Earth. And he teaches a series of remembrances that are, I think, the most important thing that any of us could repetitively say on a daily basis, either to ourselves or to another. And I'm just going to grab my notebook right here because they're sitting on the outside of the notebook. This is my Jukai notebook from last year. And in the
Impressive.
back, right, it's amazing. It's just such an education. But on the back, it's from the Metta Institute, but it's really from the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 5, verse 57. And it's a teaching that Thich Nhat Hanh went ahead and translated for us that lives on. I was in a class with Frank and he made us whisper this multiple times, like probably 10 or 20 times in a circle. Those of us who were sitting still were sitting in a circle facing out. And those of us who were moving were sitting in a circle facing in, around, concentrically around the circle facing out. And he had all of us holding this sheet of paper. Somebody would sit down in front of us and we'd both be holding the sheet of paper and we would both be tasked to read this in a whisper to the person in front of us. And then the person would read it back. We would sort of nod and bow, and then the person would stand and they would move on, and somebody else would be sitting in front of us. We would do that again. In such a way, there were two big circles of 10, of 20 in each circle, so 10 people in the middle, 40 people total. And 40 times in, let's say, a 20-minute span, this was uttered, whispered in a room. And my friend who wasn't in the class came to pick me up, and she was listening to this at the very end of the last class that he taught of this retreat. And she said it was as though she was in a church or a monastery. People were chanting, "I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand.
Beautiful.
That is what I would offer to somebody who is struggling. When you don't know what to do, you don't know how to go forward, you can't even really get out of bed. We've all been there. There are some days that I have that. And I remember that. I keep it really close here, right on my notebook, so I can see it all the time. And um, it makes life very rich. It makes relating very important and very compassionate, very precise, and also very gentle, as I said earlier. And it also makes for some good work to come through, because I'm not so much, it's not about this thing, this shell anymore. It's really about the work.
Thank you. Thank you for the important work that you're doing and that you're just transmitting through your presence. It's been nourishing just to be with you for this past hour. I've loved our time together, and I just so acknowledge this path that you've been on. It seems like it's really been a deeper and deeper refinement of the essence of you, and it's just shining from you. It's really a gift to be with.
I would like to acknowledge your incredible listening. No interruptions. Like, it's so rare. Um, I can barely do that myself. And I would also like to acknowledge the care that you're bringing, which I can feel in my heart, that you really are present and here, caring, interested, um, learning continuously. And I admire that. Thank you.